Suppose years ago you were abandoned by the love of your life after you fell pregnant, and then after you gave birth, his family told you your child had not made it. Suppose you then left that kingdom and sought a new life somewhere else, building a healer's infirmary from scratch. But now, many, many years later, after the wounds of the past have healed, a visitor knocks on your door, and they tell you that they are your offspring's son. What would you do? Would you believe them? And who would you turn to ask questions of what really transpired? Well, pineapple. A long time ago in a faraway land, there lived a renowned healer who, for over 7 decades, had dedicated their life to medicine, to herbs and to potions, to caring for the sick, and to ensuring that whatever person who turned to her, whether in desperation or with the slightest cold, returned home whole and healthy. Yet as the years had intertwined, she had begun to feel the weakness in your joints, the slowness in your breath, the fogginess in your mind, and she knew that the time was now near for her to bit by bit let go of the realms of the healer's grove, the sanctuary of healers she had co-founded. Makoni, who was the great healer of the grove, he had ignored all these changes in your body for a long time, wanting to hold onto the beauty of health and healing they had created. Yet in the last summer, she had not just felt a stirring, a gentle blow of change. She had begun to see things differently, and she knew the time to pass the leadership baton was nigh. And so she had announced to all the healers in the grove to begin deliberations amongst themselves on who the next head healer would be. Of course, Makoni had expected competition to be fierce, and of course, she had known that the healers, with their gifts in seeing, in potion making, in pouring libations to the ancestors in prayer, would pull all the stops to get to this esteemed role. Yet she was not to know of exactly how fierce the competition for great healer would become, and the extent to which healers would go to become healer. And two, as their gift of seeing had vanished over the years, she was not to know of how the 2 new arrivals in the grove would change the trajectory of what would otherwise have been an open and logical succession plan. Yemurai had been the first arrival, the girl with the gift of seeing people's final moments before they passed, and the girl who had fled her kingdom after too many of these prophecies had led to accusations of witchcraft. And thus your mother had brought her to the grove to learn medicine and to tame her gift. Then within 2 moons of her arrival, the girl had gone on to violate the no stranger policy of the grove, and had picked a wounded warrior by the riverside and brought him into the grove as the second arrival. Yet this wounded warrior was not just a nobody. He was a fugitive prince, claiming the title of Zero Kingship, with only the crest that Makoni wore at her throat, the last piece of the puzzle to help him claim his kingdom. The crest belonged to my grandfather, the fugitive Prince Zingai had said, and because you took it with you when you fled, you denied my father, your own son, access to it when you fled. And therefore my father died without claiming his rightful seat of kingship. I have come to claim it now. Give me what's mine and let me be on my way. The words had shocked Makoni, and even though at that moment she had not had the time to digest it all, for there had been a knock on the door as the fugitive chasers sought Zingai, now she sat in her heart and stewed on it. He did not die? She asked the quiet room. He did not die. She asked again, and obviously got no response. She felt her eyes fill up with moisture, and she tried to blink it away, but tears escaped, running down her cheeks for the first time since the fateful afternoon she had been told the boy had passed, over 7 decades ago. For a moment, She was ashamed of the tears, wanted to wipe the sign of weakness quickly away, the decades-old teachings of no healer should ever cry, taunting her, but she felt so weak, too weak to move even her arms. And in that weakness, remembrance flooded her mind, and she allowed herself to visit the love story that for the briefest period of her life had gripped her young life and turned it into tiny leaps of joy and hope. Her healing gift had been no surprise to her community. After all, her paternal grandmother, who raised her, had been the greatest healer the kingdom of Zero had ever seen. And growing up on her grandmother's lap, the young Makoni had learnt all there was to treating wounds and infections, to potion making and administration, and to interpreting dreams and visions. And when her grandmother had passed, the king of Zero had come to her father's home and requested that the 18 reigns old healer come to live within the royal homestead and become the royal healer. Makoni remembered now the first time she had seen him, the first time, too, he had seen her. He had come into the healer's compound at the very edge of the royal homestead, walking into the dim heart with all the arrogance of an injured prince. But the moment he had seen her, his step had faltered, and for a long moment their eyes had been caught in an intense, energetic gaze. It had taken him a long time to finally speak, and when he did, he asked, "Who are you? Where is Mbuya Makoni?" "I am the royal healer," she said, now forcing her head to bow as it should before a royal prince. "Mbuya Makoni passed away. I am her granddaughter, and she taught me all there is to medicine. I am here as her replacement." He had nodded, then come to sit before her, grinning. "It is my first encounter with a very young healer. I hope you are as good as your grandmother." Makoni had quickly gone to work, gently removing the makeshift Musasa bark bandage that covered his lower thigh to expose a deep gash that had miraculously stopped bleeding. "My first wound during a battle," the prince, Changa said, a tad boastfully. "I have been in training since I was 12 reigns old, and I have been in combat for the last 6 reigns, and this has been the first time I have ever been wounded in battle." The young Makoni had struggled to find the right words to say, for she had grown up being told to stay away from boys. Eventually, though, she found her voice as she searched through her vials for the potion of the wound dryer and said, "You are a brave man, my prince. The kingdom is in safe hands with you in it." She had returned to him and was now kneeling beside his wounded leg and dabbing the wound with a cleanser when she heard him say, in a softer voice now, "And what is your name, new healer?" "Makoni," she responded. He chuckled. "I don't mean your family name. I mean your name." "Tambu," she said, now reaching for the infection attacker potion. She felt his silent winces as his body would tauten whenever she dabbed the potion onto his wound. But what she felt even more was his eyes, how they roamed over her face interestedly, and how they never strayed but kept on course. She could not help the goose pimples that rose over her skin, and she knew a part of her longed to look up and see his face again, and see if it was real, if the handsomeness she had seen in him was not part of her imagination. Yet she used all the restraint in her not to look up, as the path that her life would take had been read to her by her grandmother, and it was in the hakatas that had lain before her. "Your path is unclear, grandchild," the older Makoni had said for the umpteenth time the young healer had asked for a reading of your life. "It is the first time I have seen this kind of lack of clarity in my life. I have always known the future of an individual once I have thrown the bones, clear as any of my visions. But you, the ancestors have given you 2 paths. Here, the older Makoni pointed at one of the two outlier bones that lay on either side of the scattered knickknacks of your healer toolbox. Here is purpose, the path you have been called to become the greatest healer of our times, greater than even I, your teacher, to pioneer medicines and treatments that have never been seen before, to fulfill not just your destiny, but the destinies of thousands of people's lives that you will touch. Then the older healer would be silent before pointing to the other outlying bone and saying, and here, chaos, great joy, a great love, another legacy that you will build for yourself, but even greater chaos, pain and suffering, but you will experience a great love, briefly. And it had not been so difficult for the young healer to choose the path she wanted to take. Of course, it would be easy to choose your purpose and to be a great healer. That was what she wanted, and the older Makoni had told her to stay away from boys. The closer you get to the cunning minxes, the worse it will be for you to fall for them. Okay? Stay away. And now, as the young healer bandaged her royal patient, she chuckled inwardly. Why had she thought of this when attending to a prince? There was no way a royal was to be her great love. Yet how wrong she was, for he had returned the next day with a wound, which to her troubled eye looked so much better, yet he winced louder than he had the previous day, and she had known that he was pretending to be in pain, known he had come here for her exclusively. She had attended to him as professionally as she could, ignoring the intensity of his eyes that never left her face and the goose pimples that had risen all over her skin. And only once he had left the healing heart had she allowed herself to take deep breaths of calming air, while chastising herself for allowing this prince to leave her in a state like this. When he returned again the following day with his even more intense gaze and louder winces, she had decided to shut it down, telling him after she had finished dabbing the wound with potions and rebandaging it, "You are getting better, my prince. The care you put into the wound while it's still in the forest and the treatments you have received here have helped you get better. You don't need to be coming here every day, unless, of course, your wound festers." Changa looked at her, nodding, smiling. "Thank you, healer. Thank you for all you have done." He hesitated for a while, then said, "I had brought you something to show my gratitude." And he opened the pouch that hung across his shoulder and lay by his hip and began foraging in it. Yet Makoni was quicker, raising her hands to stop him. "My prince," she said, "you don't have to pay me. I am already overpaid as it is, and part of this overpay means taking care of you too." But Changa dismissed her with a quick smile before returning to peer into the pouch and then smiling victoriously again before retrieving his token of gratitude, a stone-studded golden chain. Makoni gaped when she saw it, because she knew, even from a distance, from the rainbow twinkles in the chain reflected towards her, that this was the most expensive piece of jewelry she had ever seen. "I can't," she said in a half-whisper. "I can't take that, my prince." Changa smiled at her as he offered the chain towards her in his palms. "Take it, please. It is yours." Again she shook her head. Then he smiled, a tad cajolingly, before he said, "Are you refusing a royal order?" Makoni knew all about royal orders, royal gifts, that if one was bestowed upon you, you could not reject it, for it would be disobedience and could, depending on the amiability of the royal, invite a punishment upon the refuser. So she took a deep breath, put her hand out, and watched as the studded gold slid and landed heavily into her palm. "Thank you," she said quietly, after a few dizzy moments. "It really is beautiful." Then she looked up at him and said, "Now, my prince, I speak to you as a healer. You are well now, and there is no need for you to come back for treatments, unless, of course, as I said before, your wound festers, which I doubt it will. I bid you farewell now, as I am about to go herb hunting, and I pray to the Mecca that he keeps you well and healthy." It was only after the prince had left that Makoni sighed and breathed easy. She looked at the trinket in her hand and told herself that she would take it to the queen mother, because if she was ever caught with something so expensive, an uproar would begin. Yet the next day, another trinket was delivered in a pouch by a messenger with the whisper, "The prince said to thank you." Then another delivery came, and yet another, and another. He never came to the heart personally, but sometimes, as she moved around the royal compound, she would sense a pair of eyes looking at her intently, and she would look back to find the source, and it would be Prince Changa, and he would grin up at her excitedly. For some reason, Makoni would shiver, then immediately berate herself for getting excited over a guy, pinching herself as a reminder to why it was important to her to remain focused on her healer's journey. Then one afternoon, as she had picked in the forest, she had felt a pair of eyes looking at her, and even before she turned, she knew instinctively who it was. It had been close to a moon since she had last seen him in the royal compound, and she had heard that he had gone on some border fray and had been happy to not run into him as frequently. She tried to get rid of the excitement that had risen in her gut before she turned, and taking a deep breath, she turned to find him languidly leaning against the rough trunk of a mufuti tree, his eyes dancing happily in their sockets. "Hi, my prince," Makoni said, bowing, hoping that her voice had come out sounding sane. "Hi," he responded, his smile growing wider as he stepped out of the shadows of the tree, walking closer to her, hand outstretched, ready for a handshake. After shaking hands, he said to her, "I am glad to see you. I have been wanting to see you for a while now, but I didn't want to raise suspicions knocking by the door to your heart as healthy and hale as I am, so I followed you here," he finished, shrugging. "Is there any reason why my prince would have followed me here?" Makoni asked. "Are you perhaps looking for some medication?" "Yes," he said, "I am looking for a good luck charm. You see, I have taken a liking to a certain young woman, yet I am at a loss to find ways to draw her in. You see, she is so serious, so stoic, and I was hoping that there was a root I could chew or I could throw in her cup, surreptitiously, of course, so I could make her mine." Makoni's heart skipped some beats, and she was ashamed of the anguish that seemed to have settled in her throat. Yet she chose her next words carefully. "I have charms, my prince. You will have to come to my heart, and I will prepare some for you." And later that day, he was feeling the presence of her heart again, his manly scent absorbing the scents of potions and herbs that Makoni used in healing, and his body casting a huge shadow that covered half the wall. She quickly wrapped some potions in a pouch and handed it to him. "Pour 3 drops of the potion in your water whenever you see her. She will fall for you faster." Yet she was surprised when he unclasped the tin bottle that lay in a small pouch by his side and watched as he poured 3 drops of her potion into the bottle, and was even more shocked when he handed her the bottle, smiling. Makoni laughed nervously and quickly shoved the bottle towards him, saying, "My king, you know very well that I can't accept that." She had expected him to laugh and say he was joking, yet was shocked when his eyes turned serious and he said, I was joking about the charms and the good luck portion. I know who I am as a man and that I do not need this to get the woman I want. I just used it as an excuse to see you again, to spend time with you. I did not expect to feel like this, Makoni. He raised his head now. But from the first day I saw you, I have been unable to sleep. All that is in my mind is you. I wanted us. But Makoni interrupted him before he could go any further. My prince, she was ignoring the rapidity of your heartbeats. You know, you and I cannot be together. You are royalty, and I am just a lowly healer. Please, do not make my job here difficult. Being a healer is everything I know and... It was Changa's turn to interrupt. He said, suppose there were no titles between you and I. He was looking directly into her eyes. Suppose you and I are just commoners. Would your response be different? Makoni hesitated as she looked into his eyes, and yet that hesitation was all that Changa needed, for in it lay the answer. By the time she said, yes, even if we were just commoners, my response would still be a no. He was already smiling, and she knew he had heard something else. Look, he said, nobody has to know, at least for now. You and I can keep it on the down low. And bit by bit, I will introduce the idea to my father. See, I am the only royal prince, the only king to be, and my father has never denied me anything. With time, I will let him know of our relationship, and I am sure he will agree. A royal healer becoming family? Come on, Makoni, please, say yes. Makoni would forever curse the part of your brain that had caused her head to jerk up and nod in agreement. But in that moment, she had thrown all the teachings she had been taught to the wind, and against her grandmother's hakatas, decided to risk it all. For she had never been propositioned to by a boy before. They had all been intimidated and stayed as far away from her as possible. And two, it must have been his eyes with a melty gaze that made it impossible for her to say no to him. It was a whirlwind, their dalliance. It was a whirlwind characterized by showers of gifts that arrived with messengers in the morning, and long roams in the forest that Makoni undertook under the pretext of looking for herbs. For the first time in her life, Makoni refused to be in charge of anything. She was tired of being the person on whom people came to look for answers to questions they could not even articulate. She was tired of giving solutions, of tending to other people's gardens. And here she allowed herself to be tended to be a garden unto herself. And she allowed herself to be mindless, to let him think for the both of them. Which was why, because of this mindlessness, she had acquiesced to his strokes, his caresses, his touches, and even when he had asked for the prize, she had agreed to, giving it to him in the best way her inexperience would allow her. And the inexperience had come to cost her, for 3 moons her bloods did not come, and inexperienced as she was, she had been relieved to be rid of the pelvic-wrenching pain and the fierce bloodiness that accompanied them. But after 3 moons, as she was passing by a mirror in the courtyard, she had caught sight of her bloated stomach, and she knew. She told him the next day as they walked in the forest, hand in hand. I am pregnant, she said, and first felt his hand stiffen in hers before he let go completely and turned to look at her. What do you mean? There was no masking the alarm in his face. You are a healer, aren't you? Why didn't you protect against this? She had never seen him so mad before, and it scared her, so all she said was, I am sorry. He took her shoulders in his palms and stooped his handsome face to look into hers, his eyes red with unmasked fury, before saying, Do something about it, and storming off into the direction of the royal homestead. Makoni had honestly tried to do something about it, mixing potions of powders and roots to cleanse the shame that sat in her tummy, yet nothing worked. It was as if the foreign object had been welded to her womb by steel. It refused to budge, and like the shame it was, it grew bigger and bigger, that there was no hiding it. Until the afternoon there had been a knock on her door. Wearily she called, "Come in," and the queen, regal, entered. The queen had been so nice, the nicest interaction Makoni had had in the last 6 moons, and the older woman had simply asked, "Whose is it?" Makoni could not lie. She was a healer, and healers did not lie, so she simply said, "Prince Changa," and watched as the older woman recoiled in shock before she quickly smiled, patting the young healer's knee and saying, "It is fine. We will take care of it." Taking care of it meant that on the day she went into labor, a midwife was summoned. When the baby then came, it screamed once. Then the midwife said, "It is a boy." Then some heartbeats later, she said, "It is gone already," before whisking it away before Makoni had even held it. A week later, as Makoni sat in her heart, pondering on the double loss of, first, the father, who she had last seen 6 moons ago before he had gone on a military mission, and second, the child she had carried and never held, a knock sounded on her door. "Come in," she called out feebly. An old, strangely familiar man entered, and he said with hardly any preamble, "I am the new royal healer. I have been told to tell you that your services have been terminated and that you have the rest of the day to pack and leave." Makoni shook her head now as she sat by the fire in her heart, ignoring the tears that free flowed down her cheeks. Her son had lived. They had taken him away, had never given her the chance to hold him, to cradle him, to know him. And now, 7 decades later, late, the chaos had come chasing her and crushing all around her. Part of her wanted to scream, to bang her head on the walls, but she was too old for so much strength. "It is too late," a voice whispered in her head. "It is too late for that. You have to do right by your grandson." Instinctively, she reached for the crest that lay on her chest. For her, it had simply been a pendant, a cute trinket given to her by a lover. She had no idea that it was the real royal crest, yet now that she knew what it was, could she give it to the fugitive prince? But before she could think much about it, there was a frantic knock on her door. "Great healer Makoni," a voice said, "come quickly. A healer has been caught with ornaments of witchcraft. Somebody has been using witchcraft in this grove against our rules and policies. Come quickly, great healer, come." To be continued. Thank you guys for watching and for watching to the end. I appreciate you being here. This story is part of a series of stories set in a pre-colonial African hospital, and it explores the intrigue and mystery surrounding the hospital and its characters. Please do continue tuning in for the next installments. Also, do not forget to like, subscribe, comment, share with other people. Lots of love and goodbye.